You are listening to Mr. Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP.
Hello and welcome to the Miss Apex MotoGP podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may just be punters, but we love to talk. After a weekend in France, MotoGP returned to Spain for the truly action-packed round 6 of the season. Just when you thought Jorge Martin and the Aprilia could be the complete package again, the domestic but erratic Martinator was all over the place. And having featured in a horrific incident, Fabio Di Giannantonio emphasized that he is Ducati's leading rider. I am your host, Jules Segers, and once again we are assigned to the impossible task to fill the gap temporarily left by Kyle. This leaves me with just one fellow MotoGP enthusiast, but no one less than our tire-obsessed trumpeter, Matt Trumpets. Matt, what's up over there in New York City?
Well, I gotta say, I'm definitely no Kyle, but I am schwitzing up a storm. It is north of 30 C here. And as someone who grew up in a hot environment, you develop a way of sweating that literally you get out of the shower and it's like the shower follows you around. And I bring this up because, not because I'm really concerned about my personal comfort, but because I tell you, you know who's really sweating now? Aprilia. They have got the big giant flop sweat running down their forehead over this weekend, I think.
All right. Well, we'll definitely get into that in this episode. And let's start off by our weekend overview. The weekend in Barcelona started with Marco Bezzecchi having seen his championship lead minimized to one single point to his teammate Jorge Martin, with Fabio Di Giannantonio in a respectable third, 44 points behind Bez. The weekend saw Maverick Viñales back in action finally on the KTM, which was good to see. It was also good to see that he wasn't desperately lagging behind and constantly in last position. And that while the track conditions weren't great. Barcelona is known to be a low grip track. The surface is very old, and especially the MotoGP guys have been calling for resurfacing for years, but somehow that doesn't happen. And we saw the impact of that immediately on the Friday when Jorge Martin had a big crash, a scary crash in turn 12, where his bike was released into the air fence. And while Jorge was crashing in the same trajectory of his bike, he saw that bike being bounced back from the air fence, heading towards him, and luckily it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But he did stand there, seemingly a bit groggy, which might have influenced his weekend more than we thought at that point. It was also the first time, because of that, Jorge wasn't in his best shape on the rest of Friday, and that he missed out on Q2 direct qualifying for Q2 for the first time this season. And he was joined in that group by Pecco Bagnaia, who didn't manage to continue his Le Mans form with another good weekend. He was struggling quite a bit. And also Ayagura, surprisingly, not straight into Q2 as well. Who were fast was definitely Pedro Acosta in his home race. He was faster during the Friday. Alex Marquez also, he did find his form back after a kind of lackluster Le Mans weekend. Jean Zarco was also still going strong. And also Fernandez on the Trackhouse, also very fast on the Friday immediately. Marco Bezzecchi not really on it. He did manage to get straight into Q2, but he crashed in that session where Jorge Martin and Morbidelli were also taking part in, which meant that Bagnaia and Ogura didn't get out of Q1 on the Saturday morning. But it was Acosta, as on the Friday, putting it on pole, which was kind of impressive. Given Spain's long straight and the KTM nowadays not the strongest on the straights, but he managed to put on pole. Morbidelli surprisingly, coming out of Q2, putting it on the front row together with Alex Marquez. Notable qualifiers were also Fernandez and Zarco on row 2. Digi, not so good, P6. Jorge Martin, P9. And Marco Bezzecchi, the championship leader, on P12 for the sprint and the Sunday race. So without further ado, let's get into the sprint review. Right, Saturday sprint started with another turn 1 incident. We've seen several over the years in Barcelona, and this time the sprint start, and by turn 1, Digi touches Brad Binder's KTM, which led to Brad Binder going down, and he took out Joan Mir on the Honda. So that was a turn 1 incident straight away. And that made Jorge Martin have a promising start. But by lap 3, he was involved in another crash in turn 10, and it wouldn't be his last of the weekend. Matt, what struck you the most about the sprint race on Saturday? Because to me, it seemed like it didn't have a lot of action, but especially Pedro Acosta starting from pole. Did he make the most of that in your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, I think he's very close to a breakthrough here. And understand that I'm looking at this with the benefit of hindsight. I wouldn't have had necessarily this insight, but he really is like one lap short of just winning it all. But looking at his performance, I think he needs to have done literally what Marc Marquez did to everybody, which is get a lap or two in front to get your tire pressure settled, and then stop trying to lead and save the tires for the last 3 or 4 laps where you can really take maximum advantage. Because it just seemed like to me that that Alex was on the edge with his tire grip. And that was, as was announced later, the closest ever sprint finish in a MotoGP sprint race since they've been added to the calendar. So, yeah, the KTM performance, absolutely, it's there. Acosta, clearly that fast. And this being a track that seems to suit them very well. Not so much all the Aprilias and some of the Ducatis, but we'll get to that. But the other thing that I want to talk about, and this is again looking back in hindsight, is I think that turn 1 incident kind of really did take a lot of the race out of the race. And it was a real shame for Binder, who's been desperate for a good result and was well placed for maybe, judging by Acosta's performance, that the podium wasn't out of reach for where he was starting. And instead, he found himself just punted directly out by Digi. And the reason I saw given for that, I don't know what you saw, is essentially the Digi got sucked into that corner by the dirty air and had to go to the inside to avoid everybody, and Binder just wound up getting caught by that. And then that was him and whoever was next to him just done for the rest of the race.
Yeah, Sean Mir was next to him, and I think you mentioned a very good thing there, because Barcelona is one of the few tracks where they enter turn 1 with such speed. The run up is pretty long. I think they hit about 280 kph entering the braking phase, and at such speed, and then being in such a pack, you it's so hard to avoid, I imagine, getting in someone's dirty air, losing your downforce, or not being able to stop your bike. So yeah, that's and it of course wouldn't be the last time this weekend when turn 1 would feature in the reports. I think going back to Acosta for a small bit, he right up in the end, he seemed to have had enough tire left to really push for P1 again. But I guess Alex Marquez, like last year, found his Barcelona form and made it seem like the Ducati was just like 2 races ago in Jerez, the bike to be on at that point. Also notable in the sprint, Digi, starting P6, but getting a podium. Pecco Bagnaia rehabilitated himself a bit, ending P6, starting 13th. But also Jean Zarco is really strong on the LCR, finishing where he started in P5. Very solid performance. But yeah, we don't want to get ahead of things, Matt, but was Marco Bezzecchi kind of we can't say the loser of the sprint, but he sure didn't capitalize on Jorge Martin not finishing.
Well, yeah, and both of those are worthy of discussion. But again, this is one of these things that sneaks up on you. But you go back and look at the potential race the Hondas could have had, and again, you're left with, wow, that I would have loved to have seen Mir in that race, because the Hondas did look really strong here, even though they lacked some of the top end speed, made them vulnerable at the end of the long straight. They really made up. Like, you watch them through the corners now, and they might properly be the fastest bikes through all of these corners. So it's going to be interesting to see if they get to a point where they can balance it out enough at the tracks that require sort of more power. I don't know. Yeah, the mystery here really is Bezzecchi. I don't think we've seen a weekend yet where he's made zero progress across the weekend. And I think both by his own admission and by just the evidence of our own eyes, he really just he couldn't do very much. You saw everybody else, Agura, everybody else moving forward on the Aprilias. Martin looked locked in to really do some damage till, of course, he fell off again. And yeah, I don't know. It's a mystery to me. And I think it's a mystery to Aprilia. And that's why I say they're sweating, because the one thing you don't want is a weekend where nothing works and you don't know why. That is just your recurring nightmare. And you can overreact to it just as much as you can underreact to it, I think, as a team from an engineering point of view. And you also have this interesting dichotomy that's coming up of you've got your fastest rider and your best rider not being the same person right now. And I'm very curious to see where this goes over the course of the season.
Yeah, that is an interesting dynamic, isn't it? Because I think if you'd ask 10 MotoGP followers and you ask them, is Jorge Martin or Bezzecchi the more naturally talented, fast rider, they'll probably 9 out of 10 would say Jorge Martin. But then you had Bezzecchi with this amazing start of the season, winning those first 3 races, etc. But yeah, it was the second weekend in a row where he also said afterwards, like, yeah, I was lacking not in one specific area. It was like everywhere I lacked a bit, and he couldn't find the answer. And I guess that's also how do you say it, an attribute to a world champion level rider, to maybe being able to fix those things during a weekend and not being stuck in the same momentum when things don't really work your way.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would always start with, if you're going to call somebody an alien, it starts with their ability to adapt around things that would stymie less talented. And understand, when I use the word talented, we're talking the difference between 10,000ths of a percent here. I'm not saying you use these scales, but you forget the context. And I think it's really important to remember the context. None of us could even begin to do anything like what we see on TV. And even the slowest guy out there is pretty incredible compared to us mortal. But yeah, you would peg, I mean, it's a classic thinker versus reactor. Martin is a reactor. You put him on a bike I think Quartararo is the same way. He will tell you, you ask him an engineering question, he will give you 7 different answers. He has no idea. He doesn't necessarily really even care.
Yeah.
He gets on the bike, gives it half a lap, and he's like, okay, I'm going to make it go as fast as I can make it go until either I fall off or I hit the checkers. And that's, I think that's what we saw. There was absolute, almost overconfidence because the feeling coming to him was so good and felt so right to him. He got suckered into just asking a little too much of the bike, like that fine margin of, I really want to feel like I do this. Like, okay. I had a thing the other day. I was riding the rental bike and I went around a turn and I clipped a pedal, kicked the rear wheel out. And that's really, you don't want to be doing that. But it all felt so good. I just got suckered into it, not, forgetting for a moment that I'm on a rental bike and not like on my racing bike 25, 30 years ago. There's a difference there. And I think it's the same thing for Martin. He doesn't quite know the edges of this bike, but he's getting to the point where he can get there easily. And once he does find them, I think that is going to be a bit more of a problem for Bez, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because if Bez is more of the thinker, you will get affected when one day you have this beautiful lead because you won the first 3 races of this season and the last couple of last season, and you're on a high and everything seems to work for you. The bike feels good. But then once you start to get threatened a bit from behind, the guy's hunting you, and it's also your teammate who was nowhere last season, and now all of a sudden he's matching your pace or maybe even being a bit faster. Who knows what it's like to fight for a world championship? You start to probably overthink a lot of stuff, and all of a sudden, what you didn't maybe even notice on your bike not being perfect, all of a sudden becomes a big thing in your mind, because you start to question a lot when you need to be fast, as opposed to kind of naturally being the fastest in the early races of the season.
Yeah, and we're going into this a bit now, but I do like it. Like, as the thinker, your advantage is precisely that. If you don't panic, you understand that any championship is a long game, and you're like, oh, Bez fails to capitalize, but he did repass. Did he not make a repass to score that point? He took advantage of, was it Aguro who went through on Bastianini, was it?
Yeah.
Ahead of him, and he took advantage of that to nail that. And those scraps of points here and there, they matter, because your job on the bike as a thinker every time is to take the maximum that is available to you and not fall off. He will regret those sprint races he fell off in at the end of the year, potentially. Whereas Martin's weakness will always be, and anyone who rides like that as a field rider, it feels great till you fall off. It's hard to dial it down that 0.5%. And I think that's been the thing about Marquez, that coming back, not in the race this time, but that's been his thing, is like, as he's matured, he's developed the ability to ride like a field rider, but also to understand how to just turn it down to 99.5 instead of 100.01, which is what all field riders ultimately go for. I don't care about my lap time. Oh, it feels good. I like go faster. Oops, there goes the front. Oh, well. Yeah. I think you're actually a great example.
Yeah, and we saw quite a bit of Jorge losing the front and
Yes.
and ending up in the gravel this weekend. Yeah, it wasn't Aprilia's finest weekend. The only thing I could think of maybe explaining the struggle a bit was that we had for Barcelona. How do I say this, for Barcelona's usual characteristics, that the air temperature was on the lower side of what you'd usually get in halfway May, and I think we saw a couple of races earlier where in the lower temperatures the Aprilia isn't the most at ease on the track, so maybe that might have played a role, but yeah.
I was avoiding tires, but you have taken us right there.
Ah, darn it.
It is a thing. Like, one of my favorite things I ever learned was that as a tire, when you turn it into a corner and you're braking, it's always there's a maximum amount of grip you have. And the more you turn, the less you have to brake. Otherwise, if you go over that maximum grip, suddenly you're not in control of the vehicle anymore. And within that, there's always a trade-off of tire preservation. How well do I treat my fronts and my rears across a Grand Prix distance in a fully laden bike, fully fueled bike, versus how quickly can I get them up to temperature and put a lap time on the board? And I do think you may be onto something with your temperatures, because historic data for that temperature range would be lacking. And these bikes are very much a constant moving target. So you bring new developments, you bring a new thing, you try a new suspension setup, and suddenly, great, we've done this, we think this will get the tire, you'll have maximum usage at the end. But what that means is that when it's cold and you go out and run that first lap, you might have to run a second or a third before you can really go to the maximum potential of the bike, which you can feel from the off. The moment you get on the bike, you go through it, you feel like, oh, it can do this. But if the tire hasn't caught up to, if your tire hasn't caught up to the reality of what you want it to do yet, you wind up, I think, where Martin did a lot, which is just sliding across the pavement going, dang it, dang it, dang it. Because it felt like it should be there, but there's such tricky little beasts to deal with.
Yeah, very true. I think 2 of Jorge Martin's 4 crashes by himself were in like early laps of his stint, or either his, in this case, a sprint race. So yeah, that's an area to improve. Going back to that sprint race to finalize that bit, solid win by Alex Marquez. With Acosta just second. Some said it was a photo finish. I thought that was a bit exaggerated, but yeah, it was definitely close and an exciting final lap. So having said all of that, let's go to our Grand Prix review. The Sunday race, where to start? I think we should start with all the incidents, Matt. And you'd almost forget that almost for half of the race, not a lot was going on. We had a nice front group. Again, Alex Marquez, Acosta, going fast up front, and it seemed like the race was settling down a bit, like it usually does in that mid period of the full length, and then all of a sudden on the back straight, coming out of turn 9, Pedro Acosta's KTM doesn't seem to have any torque, and you see Alex Marquez just being able to avoid hitting him straight in the back, but still catching the side of Acosta's backseat. And I think we all saw what it looked like and what happened. Matt, I wanted to talk to you about, because in the aftermath, of course, a lot of different stuff happened after this. Another severe incident. You kind of noticed a tendency of, this track is dangerous, while Catalunya doesn't have a reputation of being a dangerous track. What was this a specific incident, or could this also happen on the back straight at Coda, for instance?
So if we're going to talk about the Marquez Acosta incident, that could happen at the exit of any high-speed turn onto a straight. And to be clear, the officially given reason I've seen printed is electrics. He had an electrics failure, lost a drive. And you can see at the moment it happens, he's already putting his hand up, but it was too late, because Marquez was there. He did his best to try and avoid him, but the impact was pretty massive. Mostly the chassis, though. The carbon fiber absorbed a lot of it. He stayed up, but it spit him off to the side. And this is where I think he got both unlucky and very lucky at the same time, because he was upright for quite a ways till there was a little graveled-in drainage ditch, kicked his rear up in the air, and when it came down, the whole bike just turned sideways, but it thankfully spit him straight. So he continued in the little corridor between the track and the barriers, did some barrel rolls, did eventually bounce up against the barrier and hurt himself that way as well. But the bike actually became a real problem because Zarco got injured, Fernandez got injured, Digi got injured. And this is why they give the bikes, I'll just say it, a harrow cut every few years, an aero cut, because the speeds they're achieving at the end of regulations, you have to think of that speed as being like a battery. The faster you're going, the more energy is stored there. We don't normally see it. But if you look at Marquez's bike come apart down that straight, you understand that's why they want to slow them down every few years and make the teams resolve those problems to get back there. It's just basic rider safety.
Yeah, you normally don't, especially on television coverage, and you have this frontal camera position. You don't really get a feel for exactly like you said, the amount of energy that these bikes carry at that point, and even because this wasn't that far from exit in turn 9. It's not like they'd been full throttle for 5 seconds already, but even at that point they were doing 200 kph easily. And then you just see the rampage, the chaos of all these parts, and yeah, like you said, a few of the riders getting hit. Digi got hit the worst, I think. Especially if you also look at some of those stills, those pictures, how lucky he was that the Marquez's front tire and half of his suspension hit him. Not like 30 centimeters more to the back, because it probably would have hit his body or maybe even his head.
Yep.
But yeah, it looked brutal, and amazingly, if you hear what the injury of Alex is eventually, of course, a fracture in your back, your spinal cord. That's not great to have, but when you saw the footage, you think a lot worse, and
Yeah.
a broken shoulder. If I'm collarbone.
Yep.
Yeah.
They played it as collarbone. That's what
Yeah.
I saw.
which is like a really bike rider injury, that
Pretty
you
normal.
can, you can get that from going down with 30 kph. So that's luckily we can talk about that incident like this, and we had a restart after that. I think it was about an hour after the incident, the red flag, and the race was restarted. Grid positions according to the race order by the time that Acosta Marquez crash occurred. And again, another T1 turn 1 incident. Jean Zarco, exactly like how you described Didja getting into the dirty air. Jean Zarco said, I couldn't stop the bike. I was sucked in by Marini's dirty air. So Zarco can't stop the bike, looks out of control, hits the back of Marini. Zarco goes down, ends up getting in contact with Pecco Bagnaya's rear, and his left leg gets stuck between the tire, Pecco's backseat, and the exhaust. And again, the images speak for itself. But what struck me the most from the live footage after or before all the reruns, of course, was Marini's and Pecco's reaction. The sort of desperation, putting their hands up in the air, putting their hands on their helmets, like, I can't believe this is happening, and factually calling for a red flag, like calling to stop the race. And I don't remember seeing riders acting like that towards race direction, towards whoever is in power to do that at that point. A freak accident, Matt. Again, it could happen everywhere, but yeah, this turn one is starting to become a problem.
Well, yeah, and so you say a freak accident, and I think the odds of getting your leg trapped in that way probably pretty low, but the odds of an accident at turn one in Barcelona significantly higher. Now, I do want to back up some because there was a whole bunch of racing that happened before the Marquez thing. Like I'm looking at my notes and I see like this whole fight between Zarco and Marquez and Martin. There was some brilliant racing going on before the first incident. But to specifically talk about Zarco, one of the things that he's angriest is at himself because he sustained a fairly serious ankle injury. And he's like, I really shouldn't have been on the bike. And this, for all we can talk about track safety, there's someone who looks at that. While we talk about bike safety, there's someone who's going to look at how his leg got trapped, look at the regulations and say, do we need to make an accommodation to keep that sort of thing from happening? Because the reason, as I understand it, the riders were there is they were trying to assist him. They were afraid to touch him because they don't have the training that your marshals, the medical intervention people do. But his leg was trapped still in the bike and sitting on the hot exhaust, and it was burning him. So they wanted to extract his leg. They were afraid to touch him. And obviously, if you see someone like that and you don't know what to do, the first thing you do is ask for more help. And that's really what they were doing. And just props to them for trying to intervene and intervening in the way they did. I think the issue here is there's nobody looking out for the riders in these circumstances in the way that they're looking at the bikes, in the way that they're looking at the tracks. So, and there's not a riders union. There's not the equivalent of like the Grand Prix Drivers Association for them. And they have complained about being ignored by the Safety Commission in the past to the point where they mostly don't go. You have a real confluence of unfortunate events at the current time regarding this because there's safety, physical safety. Like if you saw Marquez, like I did, it looked very clear to me that he was unconscious, flat out unconscious, at least for a little bit. All right. If I see that on video and I'm the rider safety representative, I don't care what he tells me. I'm like, dude, you very much look like you were unconscious. That's it. Game over. Don't care that you could get back on and finish the race. You got Bagnaia saying I got back on and then I was dizzy. I felt all out of sorts. Well, I mean, look, I get it. I'm an athlete. I have done the exact same thing and it was equally stupid. But you are so fired up by the competition. You really need somebody there who is a neutral observer who's just going to say, no, argue all you want. Game over, done. You're riding the bench for the rest of this race. Zarco had an injury and he said, I shouldn't have been on it. I wasn't in the zone. I wasn't there. And then boom, there you go. Doesn't quite anticipate the aero wash. Marini takes his front wheel into Bagnaia. And we have this whole second disastrous set of events in the same race, which already featured like really a lot of, what do you call it? Argy-bargy over there in Britain, I suppose. It was already a pretty messy racing circumstance up until that point, ignoring those things. So I feel like if there's a missing link here, yeah, we can look at specific concrete things, but the big thing is they need a rider safety representative who isn't beholden to any commercial interest and is absolutely, in the way Sid Watkins was, unimpeachable in opinion. If he says you're not racing, don't care who's there, don't care what sponsors are there, you're off the bike until he says you get back on. And right now, I feel like the riders, they just have too much invested in it to make a proper call sometimes.
Yeah. Like you said, if you've ever been in sports or maybe even like competitive sports, when you go down, you the first thing you want to do is get back up and continue. And you're not wondering, am I able? How is my state, my mental state? What just happened? Should I do this? You just want to go out there again. And these riders are the same. They look at what all of them do when they go down in the gravel trap. They want to pick up the bike. They want to get out of there and continue the race. And I think what we saw a couple of times, like you said, Pecco Bagnaia, after that crash with Sarko, he landed on his head, on his neck. He resumed the race after restart 2, feeling dizzy. I mean, a MotoGP rider, being in a race and feeling dizzy, riding 300 plus kph. How,
on his second bike with a used front tire that had a leak in it, no less. I mean, come on, like you talk about recipe for disaster. There is another one. He pulled it off. And, again, training matters a lot here. And most of the time when they fall off and they do that, it's because it's perfectly fine for them to do that. But you get so used to it, you can get back on the bike. The adrenaline will take you very far before you realize, oh, dang. Like, oh no, actually, I probably, in retrospect, I'm halfway through this thing, but in retrospect, I really probably should have just not done this. And that's the problem. It's why you need somebody there who's neutral and their only concern is rider safety. And they are extremely well versed in all the subtle ways riders can be both fit and unfit to be on the bike in competition like that, especially after the second restart. I mean, imagine this, right? I'm a musician. I know what it's like to sit on stage. You got a big thing. First note, conductor picks up the baton, and then they put it down without starting. And you're like, you're whole. You were there. You're 1,000%. And then bang, you got to do it again. You got to get back in the same place. You got to be ready. And then bang, you got to do it a third time. And you've already seen some very savage examples of the way things could go wrong for you. And you might have even been injured yourself in the process. Yeah, I don't know. I tend to think that the restart itself was okay, because this is always a big question, right? Should we have had that third restart? Yes. Should everyone who took that restart have taken that restart? No. And that, in my opinion, is the problem.
Yeah, there's no authority to say like what you just said, like, okay, you're not fit or able to ride, you don't get on this bike again. It's in the end, it's the call of the rider, who probably always thinks he's able. On the Friday when Jorge Martin during FP1 had that scary crash, you saw the television images of him entering the paddock again, and the MotoGP doc was with him, and then afterwards, when he already resumed practice and the Friday afternoon session, they just came out with a report. Oh yeah, he looked concussed, and but he got the ride anyway. And there's no association that brings all the riders together. There is a safety commission, but almost none of the riders apparently go there. Pecco Bagnaia and Luca Marini came out on Sunday after the race saying, like, yeah, most of the times it's just me, us two, and Jack Miller, for instance. And Acosta says, yeah, I'm not going every time. I'm not there every week because we've seen a new bump on the track, So yeah, and Acosta said, in the end we're all egocentrics. We're all like, if I say I don't start, my competitor starts, and I'm lagging behind, and he's scoring points and I'm not, so I'm going to. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a healthy situation.
It's not, and it's exacerbated because they don't feel that their opinion is listened to when they do have an opinion. And so, yeah, none of this is surprising to me. Structurally speaking, this is something that needs attention, and maybe with the money that Liberty has, maybe the riders will have a stronger sense of, well, if nothing else, we all share the same track and make money from it. So we do have some common interests. Let's get together and make sure we're properly looked after while this sport rains money on everybody else. And with all that said, we still had racing and some good racing to boot.
Yeah, definitely. And peculiar enough, a lot of the protagonists in all these incidents, they were right up there, up front again when Restart 2 was done. Acosta was there leading the race, followed by Jean Mir, who was in the second accident. Pecco Bagnaia ran third for the first bit of those 12 laps that remained. Digi was in the top 5. Raul Fernandez, who, as you said, also got hit by the Alex Marquez parts. It was almost like surreal. Like, what are we watching? What kind of affected race are we watching? But then, Raul Fernandez knocked off Jorge Martin in turn 5 this time.
Are we gonna play it that way? Are we? We're gonna play it that way.
I mean. It was a bold move. Was it a just move, or was this off?
Well, okay, this is interesting. Because I do want to talk to you. I realize we have a time commitment to not be more than 3 hours long here. I do want to talk about the Agura incident because I have some genuine. Okay, you can't
let's
really
go
call
to
me.
that one.
No, we can go to that in a minute. I'm not quite a noob, but there's still a lot about how these incidents get judged that I am new at and don't always understand. I think I have some questions about the Agura thing. Fernandez thing was interesting because you begin to see the problem for Aprilia here. It's manifold. Right now, in the same situation at Ducati, again, you've got Gresini getting Marquez better setups than they can give Bagnaia. And you've got Trackhouse getting either Fernandez or Agura, or sometimes both of them, directly up as fast as, if not faster than, Martin and Bezzecchi. And so I find this to be an interesting thing, the start of the season. I think sometimes the top teams have too much data, and it's harder for them to sort through. And I think they, because of that, have a tendency to put the bike in its fastest configuration, but perhaps not quite stable or predictable enough for the riders to handle. And I think the mystery of Bezzecchi's weekend aside, I think that's what you see right now. That's why you get this when they're on. Yeah, they're very on. But you get this just consistent performance from the privateers. But man, Rivola went and just read Brivio the Riot Act, which I was like surprised by because like I thought they were kind of independent a little bit, but also like what's Brivio going to do about it, man? God forbid you go to a race and racing happens. And this is what the steward said. I would feel less confident on my own. But the stewards looked at it and said, no, that's just the way the game plays. And if you watch it back, and Fernandez says particularly watch the helicopter view back, he was a rider. You could say it was never on that move, but I think we had seen that move work before, so I don't think that's true. What you also see is him being there and Martin just absolutely coming across on him. Now, that's a legitimate racing maneuver. Squeeze the guy, don't let him have a good exit. He just came over too far. They had contact and he went down. And the fact that he's the one that went down, and again, this is my bicycle racing career, like if my front wheel is ahead of yours and we have contact, you are the person going down. If my front wheel is behind and we have contact, I'm the person going down. So that tells me that it might have been a bold move. It might have been a move that Aprilia would rather have not happened. But I think it was pretty legitimate. He was in a defendable place. He didn't go down. It didn't look like to me he carried way too much speed into that turn. And then that's very much, I think, on Martin, like, okay, if you're going to make that move, then, you're increasing the odds of contact there. You could have left more margin. You chose not to. And this is the thing. I think the Trackhouse guys are getting the sense of this bike and they're starting to get bigger elbows. You know what I mean? It's another headache for Aprilia to deal with because, I don't know. Brivio's out of there. So how much is he really going to care? He's going to Honda. He's going to the happy Honda fields in the great beyond. So he's going to be like, I don't know, man. They were racing. I'll tell them not to do stupid things, but, maybe have that same talk with your own riders. Because Yeah, Martin, I think, ultimately had the speed and the tire management over Fernandez. He would have wound up ahead of him if he'd stayed on the bike. And this was, I don't know, this is the one that put him into double digits, first rider of the year, into double digit crashes, but, it was certainly part of it.
Yeah, I think if one of the two could have avoided it on beforehand, it was obviously Raul Fernandez, because he initiated it, of course. But then I felt Jorge Martin should have been a bit more sensible, and like the moment you notice him, like take your loss, and maybe even by the next or the next two turns you're already up his tail again, and your time will come. It's just the beginning of the race, Jorge. Calm down, But I like Raul Fernandez doesn't have a seat for next season, as far as all the rumors go. So and like you said, he notices, whoa, I have a good bike this season. I'm gonna make name for myself. So yeah, do we want to go to the Ogura on Acosta final lap, final turn incident? Is there anything odd about the penalty that Ogura got for that, while Fernandez didn't get any?
Well, my question about that, and we still have like Digi to talk about, because like that was a lovely, lovely drive, and there are a host of tire pressure penalties to be dealt with as well. But here's the thing that I saw, because they were going into whatever turn it was, and I watched it back, not quite frame by frame because my Roku won't do that. But there was a distinctive white timing line well before you got to the entry to the corner. And at that line, their rear wheels were exactly in the same place. So I'm not being fooled by any kind of camera parallax weirdness here. On the way into the turn, a girl was on the inside and their bikes were identical, shoulder to shoulder. They went into that turn. And unlike Fernandez, where, Rivola yells at him, but then there's no penalty, and eventually it's kind of sort of everyone's like, racing, it happened. Aguirre's like, yeah, it was a stupid move. Everyone says it's a stupid move. He got a penalty, demoted to ninth. So why? What was so different about what Aguirre did? Because he looked to be fully alongside, in the sense that, like, if you just let the brakes off while someone's turning in, you can absolutely catch them up, mid apex, but you're just not going to be able to stop, and you'll probably take everybody out. It didn't look like that kind of a move. So why did he get the penalty? Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Yeah, isn't that the just being, oh, this is the final lap, even the final turn of the track, and you're robbing someone of his podium position. And if it would have happened in lap 7 of 24, nobody would have cared. I think something like that counts in a situation like that. I'm not saying it should, but I think this is how stewarding works sometimes. But
I can just,
yeah, and it wasn't the last stewarding that we'd see on Sunday, because 6 riders got investigated, most of them for tire pressures, which saw Sean Mir being robbed of a really neat second place, especially thinking of what he had been through in that turn 1 accident. Pecco Bagnaia all of a sudden inherited a podium. Fermin Aldeguer got P2. Being having been nowhere really for the whole weekend. It was just a chaotic, crazy ending to a really likewise race on the Sunday. Matt, before we finish the episode, a message for our listeners that if they're enjoying the show, then you could always give us a like or a favorable rating on your podcast platform of choice. Maybe you have some suggestions or general feedback, then you can also email us at missedapexmoto@gmail.com. And why not join us in our MotoGP Fantasy Sub League? on the official MotoGP website. We currently have 16 players in our own Miss Apex MotoGP subleague, where it's all still very close. And our listener Ragazzi from Norway is leading the pack, closely followed by Papa Mac46, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Great Britain. But why do I mention this? Of course, I'm in third place, you guys. So thank you very much. You'll find details on how to join this Miss Apex Subleague in the show notes. So, Matt, before we finish, do we have something, a moment of the weekend that you want to shed some light on before we close off?
Well, I just have maybe let's just call them some closing observations. But yes, I do have a specific thing. Thank you for reminding. And the first is my Dutch soccer coach, because I'm going to call it that because I'm American, used to tell me all the time that if he had a choice, he'd prefer a lucky player to a good player. And if you look at Bezzecchi, that's pretty lucky. That's about as lucky as it gets. But that's the flip side of the keep it right side up and cross the line wherever you can strategy that he's deploying right now. No one would have guessed 2 people ahead of him being demoted, but it essentially puts him slightly ahead of where he was. And that's status quo ante for this. And that's great for us as people watching, but it's going to be an increasing headache for everybody else. No, I think my thing that I really enjoyed most, aside from the unbelievable unreliability that KTM, and I felt bad for Maverick, who showed up, felt good, and couldn't run any because his bike broke, was that Jorge Martin's weekend started out with the most beautiful slow motion shot of him removing all of the advertisers from, was it his left arm, his right arm? Just I have off the bike, sliding on the full length of his arm through the turn. Just it was absolutely amazing. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. And then he went on to crash every single session, including the testing session on Monday that he had to go to the hospital for. So I don't know. Jorge, man, take a chill pill. What can I say?
Yeah, definitely take a chill pill, Jorge. But yeah, that is MotoGP eye candy. That shot of Jorge Martin, and he seems to be the only one to be that deep, that low in turn 10. Beautiful. I'm gonna go for a quick moment, and let's say that was when all riders involved in the incidents had the thumbs up social media updates. They were relatively fine, and after how scary it had looked, that we go to Mugello in 2 weeks' time in a fairly positive state of mind. Speaking of that, you don't have to miss us for too long. It's only less than 14 days now to the Italian Grand Prix, and that will be at the great track of Mugello, which will be very different from what we've seen in this week in Barcelona, but definitely something to look forward to. Until then, thanks for listening to Missed Apex MotoGP, and see you guys later.